They said he wasn't built for the spotlight. They said he didn't have the look, the legacy, or the last name that mattered. They said when the lights of Real American Freestyle Wrestling burned the brightest, he would disappear like smoke. But on the night everything changed, as 20,000 fans roared beneath the steel rafters and the red, white, and blue banners trembled in the heat of expectation. One man stood alone in the tunnel and decided he would either leave a champion or never leave at all. The arena in Dallas, Texas shook with the rhythm of stomping boots. Cameras flashed. Commentators shouted over the thunder of the crowd. It was the second live event of the season for Real American Freestyle Wrestling, the fastest rising wrestling promotion in the country, and every match tonight carried consequences. But for Mason Steele, tonight was survival. Mason had no famous father who paved his road. No viral highlight reel that made executives drool. No endorsement deals waiting backstage. He had a scar across his left eyebrow from a backyard ring collapse when he was 16. He had calloused hands from working construction during the day. And he had a promise he made to himself years ago while watching wrestling through a cracked phone screen in a tiny apartment in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He would not be invisible. The production manager waved him forward. "You're up in 60 seconds, he shouted. Across the hall, his opponent laughed loudly for the cameras. Travis King, former collegiate champion, media favorite, the golden boy of Real American Freestyle Wrestling. With movie star teeth and a highlight package that played before every show, Travis was already being marketed as the future face of the company. And tonight he was supposed to crush Mason Steele in under 10 minutes to continue that story. Mason rolled his shoulders slowly. He could hear the crowd chanting Travis's name. Not because they hated Mason. Because they didn't know him. The music hit. Not Travis's. Mason's. A low rumbling guitar riff blasted through the speakers. The crowd hesitated. Confused murmurs echoed through the arena as a single white spotlight hit the entrance tunnel. Mason stepped through the curtain wearing a plain black jacket with steel stitched across the back in faded silver thread. No fireworks. No smoke cannons. Just him. A few scattered cheers rose from the upper deck. The rest of the building buzzed with uncertainty. Mason walked down the ramp slowly, eyes locked on the ring. Every step felt heavier than the last. He wasn't thinking about Travis King. He wasn't thinking about the executives watching from the luxury box. He was thinking about the rent due next week. About his mother's voice telling him to chase something bigger than survival. About the first time he stepped inside a ring and felt like he finally belonged somewhere. Inside the ring, Travis King leaned against the ropes smirking. He wore gold-trimmed trunks and an expression that said this was already over. The bell rang. Travis exploded forward with a lightning-fast takedown, slamming Mason to the mat before he could blink. The crowd erupted. Mason hit the canvas hard, air rushing from his lungs. Travis transitioned into a headlock, squeezing tight, grinding his forearm against Mason's jaw. "Stay down," Travis whispered so only Mason could hear. Mason didn't respond. He shifted his hips, planted his boots, and powered up, lifting Travis inch by inch. The crowd reacted, surprised. Mason broke the hold and shoved Travis across the ring. Travis bounced off the ropes and charged again, but this time Mason countered with a brutal shoulder block that sent Travis crashing flat on his back. The sound echoed. Now the crowd stirred. Travis popped up quickly, irritation flashing across his face. He circled Mason cautiously. The underdog wasn't folding like expected. They locked up again. This time the struggle lasted longer. Muscles strained. Boots scraped against canvas. Travis tried for another takedown, but Mason sprawled and drove an elbow into Travis's back. The golden boy stumbled forward. Mason seized the opening and launched him with a thunderous overhead throw that shook the ring posts. The crowd roared. Something shifted in the air. Travis rolled outside the ring, clutching his ribs, fury in his eyes. The referee began counting. Mason stood in the center of the ring, breathing hard but steady. He could hear chants starting now. Not for Travis. Steele, Steele, Steele. Travis slid back in at 8 and immediately raked Mason's eyes while the referee's vision was blocked. Boos crashed down from every direction. Travis capitalized with a vicious knee strike to the temple. Mason staggered. Travis followed with a spinning slam that planted Mason flat. 1, 2. Mason kicked out. Shock spread across Travis's face. The pace intensified. Travis unleashed calculated strikes, targeting Mason's leg to slow him down. He wrapped it around the ring post. He stomped the knee repeatedly. Mason gritted his teeth, refusing to scream. The commentary team shouted about strategy, about experience, about how Mason was outmatched. But the fans could see something different. Every time Mason was knocked down, he rose slower, but he rose angrier. Midway through the match, Travis attempted his finishing maneuver, the Crown Breaker, a lifting slam into a neck snap that had ended dozens of careers. He hoisted Mason onto his shoulders. Mason slipped out. He landed behind Travis, grabbed his waist, and with a roar that seemed to tear straight from his soul, delivered a crushing German suplex that folded Travis in half. The building exploded. Both men lay on the mat. The referee counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They reached their knees at the same time and began trading punches. No technique, no polish, just fury, each strike louder than the last. The crowd stood on their feet. Travis swung wildly. Mason ducked and delivered a devastating lariat that flipped Travis inside out. Mason didn't hesitate. He dragged Travis up, lifted him high, and executed the Steele drop, his own finishing move, a vertical lift into a driving spinebuster that rattled the entire ring. 1, 2, 3. The bell rang. For a moment, silence. Then an eruption unlike anything that night. Mason Steele rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling lights as they blurred above him. The referee grabbed his wrist and raised it high. He had just defeated the company's chosen future. Backstage, executives exchanged tense looks. This wasn't the script. This wasn't the plan. In the ring, Mason slowly stood and soaked in the chants of his name echoing through Dallas. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. But as he climbed the turnbuckle and raised his fist to the crowd, the arena lights suddenly flickered. The big screen above the stage cut to static. Then a single image appeared. A championship belt. The RAF World Championship. And beneath it, 3 words burned across the screen. Earn it again. The crowd fell into a confused hush. Mason lowered himself from the ropes, staring at the screen. A voice echoed through the arena speakers. Calm, cold, controlled. You beat the Golden Boy. Congratulations. But around here, one upset doesn't make you a contender. If you want that championship, you will survive what comes next. The screen cut to black. Mason looked toward the entrance ramp, expecting someone to appear. Instead, the crowd gasped. Because behind him, sliding into the ring, silently, stood a massive shadow of a man. 6'7", shaved head, shoulders like concrete walls. Victor Draven, the most feared enforcer in Real American Freestyle Wrestling. Mason turned slowly. Draven didn't speak. He stepped forward, and the arena lights went dark. The lights returned in a violent flash of white, and when they did, Mason Steele was already airborne. Victor Draven's massive hand had wrapped around Mason's throat and lifted him high above the canvas like he weighed nothing. The crowd screamed as Mason's boots kicked in the air, his fingers clawing at Draven's wrist. The celebration from seconds ago had turned into chaos. Draven slammed him down with a thunderous choke slam that shook the ring to its core. Mason's body bounced off the mat. The referee shouted for security. Officials rushed from the back. But no one stepped into the ring. No one dared. Draven stood over Mason like a monument carved from stone. His expression was empty. No anger. No excitement. Just purpose. The arena speakers crackled again. You want to earn it again. The same cold voice echoed through the building. Then you start by surviving him. The crowd booed loudly now. Mason rolled to his side, coughing, trying to breathe. Draven grabbed him by the back of the neck and hauled him up once more. Mason swung weakly, fists hitting Draven's chest like pebbles against steel. Draven answered with a brutal headbutt that split Mason's eyebrow open. Blood trickled down past his eye. Another slam. Security finally flooded the ring, 5, then 8, then 10 men trying to separate Draven from his target. It took all of them to force him backward. Draven didn't resist wildly. He simply allowed them to create distance, his eyes never leaving Mason. Mason pulled himself up using the ropes. The crowd began chanting his name again, this time not in celebration but in defiance. Draven pointed at him slowly. A silent promise. Then he stepped through the ropes and walked up the ramp without looking back. Mason stood in the ring alone, blood running down his face, chest rising heavily. The celebration was gone. In its place was something else. A test. Backstage, trainers rushed Mason into the medical room. Ice packs pressed against his ribs. Gauze against his eyebrow. The doctor asked if he could continue competing. Mason didn't hesitate. I'm not going anywhere. The door opened. Travis King walked in, still sweaty, still furious. You think this makes you special? Travis snapped. You beat me once. You got lucky. Mason slowly stood despite the doctor's protests. Step in the ring again and find out. Travis smirked, but there was tension in his jaw. You don't get it. That wasn't random. Draven doesn't move unless someone tells him to. Who? Mason asked. Travis didn't answer directly. He leaned closer. You just stepped into a war you don't understand. He walked out. An hour later, the main event of the night was underway when the general manager of Real American Freestyle Wrestling, Leonard Graves, stepped into his office overlooking the arena floor. Graves was a polished man in a tailored navy suit, hair slicked back perfectly, expression always controlled. He stared at the monitors replaying Mason's victory. One of his assistants spoke quietly. The reaction online is exploding. The fans love him. Graves adjusted his cufflinks. Emotion is unpredictable. Unpredictability costs money. But sir, if we pivot. We do not pivot, Graves interrupted calmly. We shape outcomes. He turned to another monitor showing Victor Draven walking through the backstage corridor like a silent executioner. Prepare the announcement for next week, Graves said. If Mason Steele wants opportunity, we will give him opportunity. The following week the arena in Chicago was sold out. The buzz surrounding Mason Steele had doubled. Social media was filled with clips of his upset victory. Fans held handmade signs with his name. The commentators debated whether he was the next breakout star. Mason stood in the ring as Leonard Graves' music played. The general manager walked down the ramp slowly, microphone in hand, soaking in the mixed reaction. Mason Steele, Graves began, his voice smooth and precise, last week you disrupted our carefully structured path to the RAF World Championship. The crowd booed. Graves raised a hand. However, we are a company built on competition. So next month at Independence Clash, you will have the chance to prove that last week was not a fluke. The crowd roared. You will face Victor Draven. If you win, you become the #1 contender for the RAF World Championship. The reaction was immediate. Excitement mixed with fear. Mason didn't blink. He lifted the microphone. You don't scare me with monsters. Graves smiled faintly. You should. Suddenly Draven's music hit again. This time Mason was ready. Draven stepped into the ring slowly. The two men stood face to face. Mason gave up several inches and nearly 50 pounds, but he didn't step back. Draven spoke for the first time, his voice low and graveled. You don't belong here, Mason answered without hesitation. Then throw me out. Draven struck first, but Mason ducked and unloaded with rapid strikes to the ribs. The crowd exploded. Mason hit the ropes and launched into a flying forearm that staggered the giant. Draven responded with a crushing boot to the face. Mason hit the mat hard. Draven lifted him again for another choke slam, but Mason twisted midair and raked Draven's eyes, landing behind him. Mason hit the steel drop out of nowhere. Draven crashed to the canvas. The crowd counted along as the referee dropped down. 1, 2. Draven kicked out with authority, launching Mason backward. Shock spread across Mason's face. Draven rose slowly, anger finally visible. He charged and speared Mason through the ropes and onto the floor outside. The impact was sickening. Officials rushed out again as Draven continued the assault, slamming Mason into the steel steps. The referee called for the bell. The match never officially began. Draven stood over Mason's motionless body and pointed toward the championship banner hanging high above the ring. You will not touch it, he growled. Security separated them once more. As paramedics checked on Mason, the crowd chanted his name louder than ever. Blood trickled from his mouth. His ribs were clearly damaged. But as they placed him on a stretcher, he pushed the medics away. He forced himself to stand. The arena erupted. He grabbed a microphone with trembling hands. Independence Clash, Mason gasped, I'm walking into that ring. And I'm walking out the #1 contender. The crowd roared in approval. High above the arena floor, Leonard Graves watched with cold calculation. Beside him stood Travis King. You see, Travis muttered, this is getting out of control. Graves shook his head slowly. No, this is perfect. Travis frowned. Perfect. Graves smiled faintly. The more they believe in him, the harder it will be when he falls. Down below, Mason Steele stood on the ramp staring back into the ring where Victor Draven waited, unblinking. The battle lines were drawn. And Independence Clash was only 3 weeks away. 3 weeks is a long time when your ribs feel like cracked glass and a 7-foot shadow is hunting you. The morning after Victor Draven drove him through the ropes, Mason Steele woke up in a small recovery room with tape wrapped tight around his midsection. And a dull ache pulsing with every breath. The doctor had told him 2 ribs were bruised badly, maybe fractured. You need rest, the doctor said. You're not invincible. Mason stared at the ceiling and answered quietly, I don't need to be invincible. I just need to last longer than he does. Independence Clash was approaching fast, and every promotional package airing on television replayed the spear through the ropes, the steel steps collision, the image of Draven standing over him like an executioner. The company framed it as a clash of power versus heart. The fans framed it as justice versus control. Mason framed it as survival. Back at the training facility in Tulsa, far from the cameras and executive offices, Mason pushed through drills long after sunset. He didn't have a private performance center. He had an old converted warehouse with flickering lights in a ring patched together from repaired canvas. His coach, an aging former wrestler named Cole Ramirez, watched carefully. "You can't go strength for strength with him," Cole said, circling the ring. "Draven wants you close. He wants to grab you. You need speed. Angles. Make him chase." Mason nodded, sweat dripping from his jaw. He hit the ropes, practicing rapid direction changes, springing off the turnbuckles, rolling under imaginary clotheslines. Every movement sent a spike of pain through his ribs, but he didn't slow down. Cole stepped into the ring and simulated Draven's size, reaching wide, forcing Mason to slip out of holds and counter quickly. Again, Mason demanded. They drilled until Mason collapsed against the ropes, chest heaving. "Why are you really doing this?" Cole asked quietly. Mason looked up. "Because if I beat him, they can't pretend I don't exist anymore." Across the country in a private training complex funded by Real American Freestyle Wrestling, Victor Draven trained in silence. Weighted chains hung from his shoulders as he performed slow, controlled lifts. Trainers shouted numbers, but Draven never reacted. His focus was singular. Leonard Graves entered the room without applause or announcement. Draven stopped immediately. "He's training harder," Graves said calmly. "He believes he can outlast you." Draven wiped sweat from his shaved head. "He cannot." Graves studied him. "I don't want doubt. I want certainty." Draven stepped closer. "He will not leave Independence Clash on his feet." Graves nodded once. "Good." The following week on live television, Mason walked into the arena to a thunderous ovation. The fans had chosen their side. Handmade signs read "Steal your heart and break the giant." Children leaned over barricades trying to touch his hand. In the ring stood Travis King with a microphone. "You people are delusional," Travis shouted as boos rained down. "You think this is a movie. You think heart beats physics. Draven is going to dismantle him, and when he does, you'll realize last month was just a lucky night." Mason's music hit and the crowd erupted. He stepped onto the stage, ribs taped under his gear, eyes locked on Travis. He entered the ring slowly. "You talk a lot for someone I already pinned," Mason said evenly. The crowd roared. Travis sneered. "You pinned me once. But you don't scare me. Draven doesn't need luck. He doesn't need momentum. He ends stories." Mason stepped closer until they were nearly nose to nose. "At Independence Clash, I'm not just fighting him. I'm fighting everyone who decided I wasn't good enough." The tension snapped when Travis slapped him. The arena exploded. Mason tackled Travis to the mat and unloaded punches. Officials scrambled into the ring. Travis tried to escape, but Mason dragged him back, lifted him, and hit a clean steel drop in the center of the ring. The crowd counted reflexively. 1, 2, 3. Travis rolled out in humiliation. As Mason stood tall, the lights dimmed again. Draven appeared on the stage without music. He didn't rush the ring this time. He walked slowly down the ramp, eyes burning into Mason's. The crowd noise intensified with each step. Draven entered the ring and stood across from Mason. No security. No interruption. The two men circled. Suddenly Draven lunged. Mason was ready. He ducked under the grasp and hit rapid body shots, targeting the ribs, moving constantly. Draven swung wide, but Mason slipped behind and delivered a chop block to the knee. The giant staggered for the first time. The crowd sensed it. Mason climbed the ropes quickly and launched into a missile dropkick that knocked Draven onto his back. The arena shook. Mason didn't go for a pin. He stepped back, breathing hard, sending a message. Draven rolled to his knees, fury finally unleashed. He charged with terrifying speed and caught Mason mid-step with a crushing lariat that flipped him inside out. Both men lay still. The locker room emptied onto the stage as wrestlers watched silently. This wasn't promotion anymore. This was collision. Draven stood first and lifted Mason for another chokeslam. Mason raked the eyes again, slipped free, and rolled out of the ring before Draven could recover. He backed up the ramp slowly, never turning his back. Draven stood in the ring, chest rising like a machine, watching him retreat. Mason pointed at the Independence Clash logo hanging above the entrance. 3 weeks, he shouted. Draven raised one hand and slowly drew it across his throat. Backstage later that night, Mason sat alone taping his wrists when the door opened quietly. It wasn't Travis. It wasn't Cole. It was Leonard Graves. The general manager closed the door behind him. "You are exceeding expectations," Graves said calmly. "I'm not here for your expectations," Mason replied. Graves smiled faintly. "Understand something. If you lose at Independence Clash, you go back to the bottom. No more special treatment. No more spotlight. I don't want special treatment. Graves stepped closer. And if you win, you will face the RAF World Champion at Liberty Rising. Mason's eyes sharpened. Who is it? Graves' smile widened slightly. That will be revealed soon. He turned to leave, then paused. Just remember, every hero eventually meets reality. The door shut. Mason sat in silence, replaying the words. Independence Clash was no longer just about Draven. It was about something bigger. 2 weeks remained, and the giant was not the final obstacle. He was the gate. The final 2 weeks before Independence Clash felt less like preparation and more like a countdown to impact. Every promotional video now carried the same question: could Hart truly break a giant? Mason Steele stopped watching them. Instead, he focused on repetition, movement, breath control, pain tolerance. Every morning before sunrise he ran stadium stairs with taped ribs, forcing his lungs to expand against the pressure. Every afternoon he drilled counters to power moves, studying footage of Victor Draven frame by frame. Every night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, visualizing the moment Draven's hand reached for his throat and the exact second he would slip free. Meanwhile, the company shifted the narrative. On the go-home show before Independence Clash, Leonard Graves stood in the center of the ring under a spotlight. Ladies and gentlemen, he began smoothly, at Independence Clash, Mason Steele faces Victor Draven for the #1 contendership to the RAF World Championship. But to ensure there are no excuses, no controversies, no questions. The crowd buzzed. This match will be contested under no disqualification rules. The arena erupted. Weapons legal. No countouts. No protection. Graves continued, there will be a winner. Mason's music hit instantly. He walked down the ramp without hesitation, eyes locked on Graves. He entered the ring and took the microphone directly from his hand. You think that helps him? Mason asked, voice steady but intense. You think I need rules to survive? Graves adjusted his jacket calmly. I think you need every advantage you can get. The lights dimmed. Victor Draven stepped onto the stage. The reaction was thunderous. Draven walked down slowly, carrying something in his right hand. A steel chain. The crowd booed violently. Draven entered the ring and held the chain up between them. The metal clinked ominously. No disqualification, Draven said quietly. No mercy. Mason didn't look at the chain. He looked at Draven's eyes. You hit me with everything you have, Mason replied. Because if you don't finish me, I will finish you. The tension was suffocating. Suddenly Draven swung the chain without warning. Mason ducked. The chain whipped across the ropes with a sharp crack. Mason fired back with a low dropkick to Draven's knee, staggering the giant. Mason grabbed the chain mid-bounce and wrapped it around his own fist. The crowd exploded. He drove a chain-wrapped punch into Draven's ribs. The giant roared. Draven grabbed Mason by the throat and hurled him across the ring. Mason crashed into the turnbuckles hard. Draven followed with a massive running splash that crushed the air from Mason's lungs. Officials rushed the ring but Graves signaled them to stand down. Draven lifted Mason again for a choke slam, but Mason swung the chain across Draven's back repeatedly, the sound echoing through the arena. Draven dropped to one knee. Mason climbed the turnbuckle quickly, chain still in hand, and launched himself forward. Draven caught him in midair. The crowd gasped. Draven lifted him high and delivered a brutal powerbomb onto the chain. Mason's body folded on impact. Draven stood over him, breathing heavily. He leaned down close to Mason's ear. At Independence Clash, Draven whispered, there will be no one to pull me away. He dropped the chain and exited the ring calmly. Mason rolled slowly onto his side, clutching his ribs, pain flashing across his face. The crowd began chanting his name again, louder than before. Backstage later that night, Cole Ramirez paced angrily in Mason's locker room. You don't need to prove you're fearless, Cole said. You need to be smart. Mason sat on a bench, ice pressed against his side. He wants me angry, Mason replied. He wants me reckless. So don't give him that. Mason looked up. I won't. Independence Clash arrived under a sky lit by fireworks outside the packed stadium in Philadelphia. Red, white, and blue lights bathed the entrance stage. Tens of thousands of fans filled the seats, anticipation vibrating through the air. The commentary team repeated the stakes: no disqualification. Winner becomes #1 contender. Loser falls back into obscurity. Backstage, Mason wrapped fresh tape around his ribs. He looked into the mirror, studying the scar over his eyebrow, the bruise still faint along his jaw. Cole stood behind him. No matter what happens out there, Cole said quietly, you made them see you. Mason nodded once. That's not enough. Draven stood alone in a dark hallway, the chain draped over his shoulder. Leonard Graves approached him one final time. End it decisively, Graves instructed. Draven didn't answer. The arena lights dimmed. Draven's music hit first. The reaction was deafening. He walked through smoke and strobes, chain dragging behind him like a weapon of war. He stepped into the ring and raised his arms slowly. Moments later, Mason's music erupted through the speakers. The stadium exploded in support. He walked out with no chain, no weapon, just taped ribs and unwavering eyes. As he stood on the stage, he looked at the sea of fans chanting his name. He took a breath. Then he ran down the ramp. He slid into the ring and the bell rang instantly. No hesitation, no feeling out. Draven charged. Mason ducked and unloaded with rapid strikes, targeting the knee, the ribs, the back. Draven grabbed him mid-combination and hurled him onto the canvas with terrifying force. Mason rolled immediately, avoiding a crushing elbow drop that dented the mat. The fight spilled outside within minutes. Mason grabbed a steel chair and swung it into Draven's leg repeatedly. The echo rang through the stadium. Draven responded by ripping the chair from Mason's hands and bending it over his back. The crowd winced. Mason dropped to one knee but refused to fall completely. Draven wrapped the chain around his fist and struck Mason across the shoulder. The impact echoed. Blood appeared at Mason's lip. Draven lifted him for a powerbomb onto the announce table. Mason slipped free at the last second and shoved Draven forward into the ring post. The giant stumbled. Mason climbed the barricade and launched himself with a diving clothesline that brought Draven crashing down to the floor. The crowd was electric. Both men struggled back to their feet. Mason rolled Draven into the ring and followed. He hit the steel drop. The stadium counted. 1, 2. Draven kicked out. The sound of disbelief washed over the crowd. Mason staggered back, chest heaving. Draven rose slowly, eyes burning. He grabbed Mason by the throat and lifted him high. Choke slam. Mason crashed hard. Draven covered him. 1, 2. Mason kicked out. The stadium erupted into chaos. Draven's face changed for the first time. Not anger. Concern. Mason rolled to the ropes, pulling himself up slowly. Blood streaked down his chin. His ribs screamed with every breath. Draven charged for the spear that had ended so many. Mason sidestepped at the last possible second. Draven crashed shoulder first into the steel ring post. The chain slipped from his hand. Mason seized it. He wrapped it around his own waist, not his fist. He ran the ropes. And as Draven turned, Mason launched himself forward with every ounce of momentum left in his body. A chain-assisted steel drop. The impact shook the ring. Mason collapsed on top of Draven. 1, 2. The referee's hand hovered for the third strike. And suddenly the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the stadium. The referee's hand never hit 3. The roar of 70,000 fans turned into a confused wave of noise rolling through the arena like distant thunder. Emergency lights flickered faintly along the entrance ramp, casting long shadows across the ring where Mason's steel still lay draped over Victor Draven's massive frame. Then a single spotlight snapped on. Not on Mason. Not on Draven. On the stage. A figure stood there, motionless, silhouette sharp against the white beam. The crowd slowly recognized the outline. The RAF World Championship rested over his shoulder. The champion had arrived. The lights surged back to full brightness. In the ring, Mason lifted his head, disoriented. Draven lay beneath him, barely moving. The referee looked toward the stage in shock. Standing there was the reigning RAF World Champion, Marcus Vale. Marcus Vale did not rush. He walked with calm authority, championship glinting beneath the lights. Dressed in a tailored black coat over his ring gear, he carried himself not like a fighter, but like a ruler surveying his kingdom. The audience reaction fractured into mixed noise. Some cheered, some booed, most simply watched. Vale stepped into the ring slowly. The referee backed away. Mason pushed himself up to his knees, eyes locked on the champion. Draven rolled onto his side, still stunned from the chain-assisted steel drop. Vale looked down at both men. So this is what they're fighting for, he said quietly into a microphone that appeared in his hand. The crowd simmered. Vale looked at Mason first. You have resilience. I'll give you that. Then he turned to Draven. And you have obedience. Draven slowly rose to one knee. The tension became suffocating. Mason stood, swaying slightly, chain still wrapped around his waist. Are you here to watch? Mason asked through heavy breaths, or are you here to stop hiding? The crowd erupted at that. Marcus Vale smiled faintly. Hiding, he repeated calmly. I built this division while you were fighting in warehouses. He stepped closer to Mason. You think beating him makes you ready for me? Before Mason could respond, Leonard Graves appeared at ringside, shouting for order. This match is not over. Graves yelled. There was no 3 count. The referee hesitated. Draven suddenly surged forward and drove a brutal forearm into Mason's injured ribs. Mason doubled over instantly. The stadium exploded with outrage. Vale stepped back casually as Draven grabbed Mason and delivered a crushing spinebuster in the center of the ring. Draven covered him. The referee looked at Graves. Graves nodded sharply. 1, 2. Mason kicked out. The reaction shook the building. Draven stared down in disbelief. Mason rolled weakly toward the ropes, pulling himself up again. Blood streaked down his chest. The chain slid loose from his waist. Vale watched closely now, no longer amused. Draven roared and charged for another spear. Mason dropped at the last second. Draven collided headfirst into Marcus Vale. The champion staggered backward into the ropes, nearly losing the title from his shoulder. The crowd gasped. Draven turned slowly. Vale's expression had changed. Cold. Dangerous. You missed, Vale said quietly. Draven stepped forward, but Mason seized the opening. With every ounce of energy left, Mason wrapped the chain around Draven's leg and yanked backward, sending the giant crashing down. Mason scrambled to his feet and delivered one final steel drop without the chain. Both men hit the mat hard. Mason crawled slowly across Draven's chest. The referee dropped down again. 1, 2, 3. The bell rang. The stadium detonated in sound. Mason Steele had defeated Victor Draven. Officially. Clean. Under no disqualification rules. Draven rolled out of the ring in shock, staring back with disbelief etched across his face. Leonard Graves looked frozen at ringside. In the ring, Mason remained on his knees, exhausted beyond words. The referee raised his hand weakly. He was the #1 contender for the RAF World Championship. Marcus Vale picked up his title belt and stepped forward slowly. The crowd leaned in. Mason stood, champion and challenger now face to face. Vale looked at Mason's bloodied face, his taped ribs, the fire still burning in his eyes. You survived the gate, Vale said calmly. Congratulations. Mason didn't blink. I'm not here to survive anymore. Vale smirked slightly. You don't understand what it takes to carry this, he said, tapping the championship plate. You fight with emotion. I fight with precision. He leaned closer. At Liberty Rising, emotion dies. Mason stepped forward until their foreheads nearly touched. At Liberty Rising, Mason replied, your reign does. The stadium erupted. Vale raised the championship high.